Rudeus vs. Luke was far more than just a one-sided beatdown. Not only was it a measure for how Rudy compared to the average swordsman, but it was also a sincere expression of loyalty towards Sylphie. One you'd be surprised to hear came mostly from Luke, but was actually his idea from the very beginning. What the anime left out, which would have made this fight even better though, was Rudy's thoughts after of how it was so incredibly easy and his gradual realization towards why it was necessary. So, as we take a look at that and how this fight really went, consider leaving a like if you enjoyed the cut content from this video or last video. And hopefully from this one you'll gain an appreciation for why this fight was so important. Now, just in case you missed it in the last video, for all you ancient Magus Bride fans, Figurama is releasing this amazing 1/7 scale statue on April 27th. You can join the wishlist for it now using the link in the description, or you can come hang out on stream and try to compete for one. It's an amazing piece that shines in its detail and craftsmanship, and I'm super excited to be giving one away on my stream tomorrow. If you just want to pre-order one for yourself though, then be sure to join the wishlist to know exactly when it launches, since figures like these do tend to sell out quickly. Sponsorship aside though, Figurama really is an amazing partner, and we're currently in the midst of creating something special. It's a project I actually want to involve all of you in. So be sure to show them love and check out the ancient Magus Bride statue, and feel free to come to the stream and try to compete for one. But anyway, with the reception wrapping up and Sylphie talking to Alina Lise, the duel was an idea Ariel made clear came from Luke. I know the anime made it seem like it was for all their sakes, but in actuality it was mainly something that Luke wanted. It was his request from the very beginning and something he informed Ariel he desired even before the wedding reception. Now, naturally a duel like this could never be perceived as just for fun, since the weapons being used were both extremely lethal. Like, Luke's double-edged blade meant he wasn't going to be attacking with any blunt side, and Rudy's stone sword meant his attacks would carry quite a bit of weight to them. That may not sound very dangerous for Rudy's case, but after swinging this dense sword every day for hundreds of thousands of practice swings, Rudy knew if he hit someone in the wrong spot with it, it could definitely prove to be fatal. That was just how dangerous the impact of it was. It was thick, heavy, and durable to the point that you probably shouldn't hit someone with it. Especially not for something that was supposedly just for fun. Ariel wasn't too bothered by Rudy's warning though, since in addition to this being something Luke asked for himself, he was also going in fully knowing he could die from it. Should the worst come to pass, then Luke was ready to accept both injury and death. Whatever the outcome, he was more than ready for it. This was something Ariel was fully aware of, and she made sure to tell Rudy and even let him know he could beat Luke senseless if he wanted to. This obviously wasn't very reassuring for Rudy, since with him being just an average swordsman and Luke, well, the royal guard of a princess, Rudy was certain there was going to be this insurmountable gap between them. This would then spur Ariel to give a complete description of how strong Luke really was, and on paper he seems actually pretty scary. So he's intermediate in Sword God style and beginner in Water God, then has several magic items making him even stronger than that. His sword is enhanced to cut through shields as easy as butter, then his boots imbued with magic to enhance his speed. His cloak blocks heat, making him fire resistant, and his gloves increase his strength to make his strikes stronger and faster. Beneath all that is clothing described as swordproof, so all in all he was pretty kitted. It was like facing a legendary hero minus the hero part. A pay-to-win gamer who was only just a casual player. Gear like this was known to be so incredibly expensive that even if Rudy sold his newly renovated house, he still wouldn't have enough money to pay for all of it. It was information he probably could have done without, since hearing all about it made him think that he would be the one getting beat senseless. Once again, Ariel would reassure Rudy he'd be fine, but just in case he still didn't believe her, she would give him one last option to provide him comfort. Should he ever feel like his life was in danger, then and only then would Ariel allow him to use his magic. Of course, that didn't provide safety to Luke, but once again that was a risk he was willing to take. Now, it was even with that Rudy would still be hesitant, so that's when Luke himself would step up in order to change that. It was that single line we saw him say in the anime, in addition to an unfair remark questioning Rudy's manhood. He basically said if Rudy was a man he'd understand, which to Rudy was complete nonsense he felt he'd never understand. Obviously he couldn't say he didn't, so in an effort to make it seem like he did, Rudy would reluctantly accept the duel, feeling like he'd just been cheated in some way. He didn't like the idea of Luke questioning his manhood like this. I mean, he had essentially called him out, saying that if he didn't accept then he wasn't a real man. So, Rudy would have no choice but to accept, but as a precautionary measure to ensure neither him nor Luke would die from it, he would activate his demon eye and use its foresight. The two would then ready themselves only 3 steps apart, making it so in only one step either would be in striking distance. It was a tighter gap than what Rudy usually practiced with, but one he wasn't going to panic over since, well, how serious could this be? He would have no idea why this was happening even up to the moments right before the fight. Rudy would then tell Cliff to get his healing magic ready, and Ariel would commence the fight shortly after that. It's here that I wish the anime added a little bit more to it, since while they did show how Luke was completely outmatched, they didn't truly express just how much he was. What I mean is that the instant the match had started, Rudy was taken aback by just how slow Luke was. It's not that Luke was slow compared to the average person, but when you consider who it was Rudy had trained with and fought before, for some Luke was a whole entire universe behind. He was nowhere near the level of Eris and Ruijerd, galaxies apart from the oppressive Orsted, then even a whole step behind that of Soldat. If he had to compare Luke to anyone, the closest person he could think of was Linnea. She was about the same speed as him even with his items, and that made predicting his movements extremely easy. Luke's form wasn't anything special either, since while it was technically correct, his slow movements made any variations in them easily counterable. So, to Rudy he was essentially fighting someone normal for once. A knight whose skills may be superior amongst his peers, but is completely manageable when compared to the true monsters out there. This allowed Rudy to counter with a simple arm chop, which was a basic sword god skill he'd practiced over and over. It was a move he'd repeated over 100,000 times, resulting in the very act of it being ingrained into his body. The heavy blow would then break Luke's arm right on impact, and before he could even switch to his other arm, Rudy would kick him in the chest and send him flying. The fight was over and Rudy the victor. Rudy honestly couldn't believe how easy the match was, and he even went so far as to call it a joke. I mean, with so many other swordsmen out there who could beat him even with his magic, to so easily beat one without was quite the surprise for him. So much so that Rudy knew he didn't even need his demon eye. Sure, the fight would have gone on a little bit longer without it, but the outcome would have been the same given how basic Luke's attacks were. So, Ariel was absolutely right when she said that Luke was no match for him. This brings us now to the question of why, and while the obvious answer is because Luke was testing him, the true answer was something more akin to Luke's pride on the matter. As Ariel herself said in the anime, because her and Luke loved Sylphie as a precious companion, it was only natural they want to make sure the person they're leaving her with is the right one. It was when Ariel brought up her duty after this that she made sure to emphasize the likely outcome was death. You see, as much as she wanted to believe that she could take the throne, to die trying was far more probable than actually succeeding right now. Rudy wondered why she didn't just abandon all that, but for Ariel this duty went beyond her life. It was to honor the memories of all those who died to get her this far. So, to leave that behind and stay here in Rinoa was the same thing as to betray all those who'd helped her get here. She knew this privilege came with responsibility, and it was that unwavering conviction which Rudy really resonated with. To see her so resolute on the path that she'd set out for herself convinced Rudy that she actually would be a great ruler. The problem with a mindset like that though was that despite Sylphie having nothing to do with it, her unshakable bond with Ariel made her part of it now. Even if she wasn't bound to Asura the same way Ariel was, she was however bound to the bond that she'd formed with Ariel. Rudy honestly had no trouble understanding why that was, because if Ruijerd got up one day and said he was gonna fight Laplace, Rudy knew he would join him even if it did mean certain death. It's not necessarily the greatest comparison, but it does capture the idea of wanting to fight for your friends. That's just how important close bonds like that were. Naturally, Rudy would try to stop her if he knew the fight wasn't one she could win, but knowing Sylphie and knowing how selfless she was, it was probably easier just to join her. That's when Ariel would threaten to take Sylphie back, and she would basically say how there were other methods in which she could do so. Sure, she couldn't beat Rudy in terms of raw power, but when you've been in the game as long as she has, there were definitely other ways to get around that. Ariel would then leave shortly after, and it was then and there that Rudy thought, this is someone I want to be there for. It didn't matter what Ariel wanted or where it was, because when the day came, Rudy knew he and Sylphie were going to be there for her. Rudy would then go back inside, and it was after Sylphie had heard about the duel that she would thank Rudy for going easy on Luke. She wasn't remotely concerned that Rudy had just been in a fight, but was instead grateful that Rudy had spared him. She knew Rudy could have killed him if he wanted to, and it was the fact that he didn't which she was very much appreciative for. Of course, she felt bad for Luke, but for Rudy it was clear him losing had never even occurred to Sylphie. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed seeing more from the duel, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing. There'll be more Mushoku Tensei videos every week and early cut content streams every Sunday. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!